has any questions during this presentation, please use the raise hand function and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Before we get started, there are a couple of housekeeping items to take care of. Okay, so on your screen, you'll see today's anticipated meeting schedule. Please note that all times are estimates and movement through discussion is flexible. We just want to draw your attention to the start and end time of 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. In order to reach and maintain quorum, we had to condense this meeting, which means that we will only have 3 hours to cover a large amount of information and make some tough decisions. So with that, Lindsay, would you mind taking roll?
Absolutely. Co-chair Sam Byers said that they would not be able to make it today. So co-chair Casey Beck.
Present.
Jeremiah Stromberg. Liz Weber.
Present.
Stephen Gunnels.
Present.
Eric Swallow. Chief Marcia Harnden.
Present.
Alicia Beamer.
Present.
Stacy Brubaker.
Present.
Sheriff Nick Hunter.
Present.
Dr. Sharon Stanfill.
Present.
Senator Gelser Bluen also let us know they would not be in attendance. Jeannie Gullickson.
I'm here. Good morning.
RJ Navarro.
Present.
Michelle Mason. And Representative Choatson. Paul Solomon.
I'm here.
And Carl McPherson also let us know that they would not be in attendance. And with that, we have quorum.
Hello, Suzanne Shanti is also here.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. Now we will take a moment to pause for public comment. Lindsay, has anyone signed up in advance of the meeting to provide public comment?
We have nobody signed up ahead of time.
Okay. If we do have individuals who did not sign up but would wish to make a public comment, please use the raise hand feature to be called on before speaking. Do limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes. And as a reminder, staff and the GRC members are not able to answer questions from the public during this meeting, but you are welcome to reach out to staff separately. So at this time, I'll take a moment to give anyone that would like to speak time to raise their hand. Okay, it does not look like we have anyone wishing. Oh, we may have a raised hand. No, it went away. Okay, it does not look like we have anyone wishing to make public comments, so let's move forward. Jamie, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Amani. As a reminder, here is the voice voting process for today. Staff will articulate the matter up for vote, so there is no need for motions. Those who choose to abstain from a particular vote will announce their abstentions before votes are taken. Those in favor will say yes or aye when prompted. Those who oppose will say no or nay when prompted. Members of the Impacts Grant Review Committee are public officials, and public officials have ethical responsibilities because they get to influence the operations of state government. Actual or potential conflicts occur when a public official participates in an action which would or could result in financial benefit or loss to the official or official's relative or business. Impacts Committee members who would or could potentially benefit from an award made to an application must disclose that relationship to staff and will not participate in deliberations on an application or vote to approve or not approve for an award. If you're asking, we are asking as we go through the applications that you self-identify a conflict, and if you have one, simply mute yourself and turn off your camera. Once the discussion regarding that application is over, you may rejoin the discussion. If you have questions about whether you do have a conflict, please contact and direct your questions to the Oregon State Ethics Commission. Presented before you here is the 25-27 Impacts Grant timeline. First, this GRC met on December 15th, 2025, and the impact solicitation was released on December 17th. Grant applications were then due January 23rd, 2026, and the application review by CJC staff began January 26th. In February, CJC staff completed the application review and materials were then released to this GRC. The dark blue box with the dark blue arrow is where we are at today on March 2nd. The goal for our meeting today is to review applications and determine funding awards so that the protest period may begin. If no protests are received, contracting will begin after the protest period ends, and the disbursement of funds will occur after contracting is completed. Please note each grantee has their own individual contracting process, so the distribution of individual funds is contingent upon the execution of those contracts. This timeline is quick, but the intention is to distribute funding to programs as soon as possible to avoid lapses in funding and essential program work. The internal process for CJC staff included application review to verify all applicants met the minimum eligibility. Please know moving forward that all applications presented here today have in fact met that minimum eligibility. Staff conducted follow-up outreach to clarify application responses and budgets and identified and flagged applications needing further review by the GRC. Staff then reviewed budget line items for alignment with the CJC Grant Administration Guide and impacts priorities, removed unallowable expenses when sufficient clarification from applicants was not provided, and flagged additional items for this GRC to review. Finally, staff calculated the potential funding requested and compared this number to the available funds to determine the overage amount. Staff then developed potential funding reduction methodologies for GRC consideration. Of those methodologies, staff have prepared 2 staff recommended reduction strategies for you to consider today. We will now begin with the 25-27 impacts application review. First, you will be provided with an overview of the scorecard utilized when reviewing and scoring applications. You will then be walked through sample applicant to orient you to the information staff has prepared for your consideration for each applicant. Next, we will go through each applicant. Historically, this GRC has reviewed tribal government applications first, and we are going to continue with this practice today. After each applicant, there will be an opportunity for questions and discussions, but it is worth noting we do have 15 applications in limited time. Our staff estimate is that we will have approximately 4 minutes per applicant to allow for enough time for reduction strategy discussions and decisions. I will now pass it to my colleague Will, who will provide you with an overview of the scorecards.
Co-chairs Beck and Byers, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. For the record, my name is William Ash Halchin, and I'm staff. When we met last, we discussed the Grant Program Operating Profile, or GPOP, as a primary means for the for the CJC to meet the call of this GRC to apply what we've learned over the years as part of the Impacts Grant Program and provide additional means of understanding and rating applicant programs. We designed this GPOP to help offer opportunities for scrutiny by this body as part of decision-making. Broadly, the scorecard that you've seen for each applicant was designed to capture important details about programs and their operating processes, and applicants earned points for items versus starting with a maximum score that was then reduced. Higher scores in the GPOP reflect more points earned by an applicant, but it does not mean that any applications or applicants are bad. Some jurisdictions have designed programs to specifically target segments of their public safety system, or instead target services toward an ongoing cohort of individuals receiving services. A lower rating may mean that an applicant is more targeted in their reach or service provision than other applicants. In terms of how this works, as we proceed over the next couple of slides, I'll be walking the committee through each of these 3 sections and briefly cover the items within. Please don't try and strain your eyes to see the right side of this slide right now. I do, however, want to draw your attention to the shades of color that you see arrayed across these 3 sections, as these illustrate the means that staff use to rate applicants. This was an intentional design choice by staff. We wanted to diversify the types of ratings that we used here. So those items that are shaded in the light green that you see here on the screen will see in subsequent slides indicate that we used statistical software to help rate these items. This does not mean that there's any statistical significance here, but instead that staff were able to code once, and then the software would generate ratings for each applicant based on the same logic. To transition to the next color, that you will notice that the first 2 rows of that middle section here talk about similar ideas, target population, but are rated differently. While the goal of reaching high utilizers of criminal legal systems is important, which is why it is rated, it is also important to have a solid data source from which to draw this information, relevant processes or agreements in place to facilitate the transmission of these data, as well as reasonable thresholds or cutoffs to determine whether an individual may or may not be qualified for programming. Those items that are in the salmon pinkish color here indicate that these were qualitatively rated by research team staff, as these items were more related to data and data processes. 2 research staff rated each applicant's responses for items in this section, colored the same color, read them independently, and then rated them. We took care to rate the reasonableness, the clarity, and the justification provided by the applicant of the responses provided. And then the research staff met to discuss and determine final ratings for each applicant's responses. The final color that you see reflects that same substantive review process, with multiple staff independently rating responses and then coming together to negotiate the final rating for that item for that applicant. The only difference here, however, is that program staff rated those items in this denim blue, as these were more related to the strategies and processes that a local program may undertake to do the work. Next slide, please. Thank you. As I mentioned, the GPOP and scorecard are separated into 3 sections. The first 2 are listed here, and you can see the section identified in the left column. So section 1 of the scorecard is the shortest and reflects our efforts to capture information relating to the internal structure of programs. Items in this section reflect whether the local program is providing team-based care, whether they are well embedded in their local jurisdiction with programmatic partners that can either serve as a referral source or a referral destination in the case of a treatment provider, for example. These final 2 items in this first section are more about the internal processes and strategies that the staff of the program undertake, including whether and how staff meet to discuss participants, as well as the internal monitoring practices of the program. Here, you will notice that we use the statistical software to produce the ratings for this first section. For 3 of the items, we used a binary classification, which means that it was either present or absent. And then for program partners, we used a count of the number of types of partners, not just the raw count of total listed partners. That embeddedness that we hope to measure was reflected more in the counts of the types of partners versus the count itself. If a program, for example, has 10 law enforcement partners, but no other connections within their local jurisdiction, they would be more limited than other programs with additional partner types like medical providers, behavioral health treatment providers, or housing and other wraparound service providers. So we rated this item based on the count of types of partner. Each different type earned another point up to 4 maximum. Section 2 of the GPOP on the bottom part of this slide is slightly longer and helps us better understand the inflows to the applicant's proposed program through their goal and plans of targeting high utilizers in their jurisdiction. If the applicant indicated that they would be targeting criminal legal high utilizer population, then a point was earned. The extent to which a reasonable and clear plan with justification was provided as a separate rating, a goal versus a plan. And while the computer told staff if that plan existed, we took the time to carefully review the details and rate those independently. The same can be said for the health systems high utilizer target population. The plan was rated independently of the goal. The applicant's means of identifying potential new participants through both system lists as well as more direct referrals or encounters are the final items in this section. These items are rated with a binary, and a score of 1 here reflects that the local program indicated that they would use several, so 3 or more, means of identifying participants. Next slide, please. Thank you. So where section 1 helped us better understand the program structure and how staff may work together as a unit, section 2 helped us better understand the inflows to a program. And so now we turn to section 3, which is the most robust and gets into the details of program operation. We start this section with several binary, again, measuring presence or absence, items about outreach strategies, the presence or absence of objective written criteria for those programs that do not allow all participants, and whether those criteria are shared. To continue with this section, the presence or absence of individual treatment planning, needs assessment provision to participants, and the use of a screening tool, again, where applicable, some applicants propose to accept all clients, were common across applications. You will notice, however, that not all items here are those binary scores. There is one salmon pink item in this section relating to the planned outcomes for the participants in the proposed program. This is another place where CJC research staff undertook that independent staff rating work and then met afterward to determine the final ratings for each applicant. We focused on the same parameters of clear, justified, and reasonable responses being provided. Like what we saw on the last slide, with that separation of goals and plans, the identified goal of diversion from these other and more costly systems of care is different than the associated plan to do that work. And so it's important to capture both. In the green items, those goals were rated again based on their presence with that binary rating, and then multiple program staff undertook that same process of independent ratings for the items associated with the plan to do diversion, and then met after their independent ratings to determine final ratings in those areas for applicants. And so this moves us to the last 3 items in the scorecard. We are almost there, y'all. And 2 of these relate to evidence-based practices. And 1 is relating to the use of resources to effectively support the target population. For the evidence-based practice item, we counted the number of evidence-based practices that were available to participants in each proposed program. And more than 6 evidence-based practices, which was common to all programs, earned the full rating of 3. Had there been programs with fewer, we had established thresholds, but that was not necessary in the end. And then we also asked applicants how they anticipated these practices would operate in their local jurisdiction to gather more detail. These details about evidence-based practices among applicants were rated qualitatively using the process I previously described by program staff. As was this final item about supporting the target population and using resources effectively. Next slide, please. To draw your attention to the right side of this slide for Tiki County, as we orient to the subsequent slides, you will notice that what we have colloquially called the Money Mountain plots, which has 4 parts to it in the top right of the slide. So the dark gold area in the very back reflects the dollars dispersed by the CJC to local programs. And then one will notice generally as we proceed a pattern where these drop off, as we understand to be the case with this sort of with the way the last project period ended. Next, the gray overlay that is semi-transparent reflects the actual spending of the local program, and this is more likely to change over time versus the disbursement area. I do want to point out another trend, which is that at the end of the project period, it is common for local programs to have higher levels of spending, especially in the case of carryover funding from previous disbursements. This theme is common among most applicants, returning applicants, excuse me. So next, the two lines here represent quarterly service provision and humans served by the applicants, with the solid line representing humans, both new and returning, and the hash darker line representing services provided. Recognizing that this is a high needs population and program designs may affect participant flow through programming, we wanted to show a broad view of these items. The plot helps us better understand the performance during the review period over time. And then moving beneath that plot to the gray boxes on the bottom right of the screen, there are 3 of these. The first relates to the raw and percentage score for the GPOP rated items. Those with the maximum possible number of earned points would have 100% or a raw score of 47. The middle gray box here provides a view of those lines, and the plot above flattened to generate a quarterly average of humans as well as tool services. And again, a broad view of performance was taken here to show the general performance of applicants despite the variation in program design. And finally, the right side gray box reflects historical spending patterns for the applicant across the project period of the previous grant cycle. So a 90% here would indicate that 90% of the funding dispersed was spent by the program. And so I am pleased to turn this back over to my colleague Amani to continue with this slide.
Perfect. Thank you, Will, for those amazing explanations. With that, I will provide an explanation on the left side of the slide. So Tiki County is a sample county that we created to orient you to how we will share applicant information today. I'll draw your attention to the black flag at the top of the slide next to the county name. When you see a flag like that one depicted here, that alerts you that CJC staff has identified a budget line item or items that we would like GRC input on. When we come across an applicant with the flag, we'll call out the reason for the flag and open the floor for GRC discussion. Next, below that flag, we have a chart that displays the 7 budget categories that applicants were eligible to request funding under. And our sample, Tiki County, has submitted requests in all 7 categories. And the chart represents visually the proportion requested in each category. Not all counties will request funding for every category available. So if you don't see a color, you can assume that that county did not request funding for that category. The chart does only show full category amounts, but the budget sheets available in the Google Drive that we have made available for you have detailed explanations. So we do encourage you to reference those documents if you would like to get details on specific line items at any time today. Next, below that chart, we will share a high-level program summary detailing whether the program is existing or new, their total funding request, and what their requested funding will support. Additionally, we will provide a brief description on what areas that program diverts clients from. As you can see in our sample, Tiki County, it's an existing program and they are requesting a total of $680,000. Please note that all total budget requests have been rounded up to whole dollar amounts. The proposed funds include expanding services through 3 new staff positions and increasing housing support capacity. The program focuses on diversion from law enforcement contact, jail bookings, and post-release re-entry services. So, as a reminder, we will start reviewing programs from tribal applicants, and then we will follow up with county applicants. Although I explained each component on this sample slide, in order to be mindful of timing, moving forward, I will give a brief overview of some of the program's summary and the GPOP scores, and then we'll take a moment to pause to let you review the slide on your own. While we do move through applications, please keep in mind that program designs vary across Oregon. Each program is meant to be tailored to meet the needs of its jurisdiction. Our purpose with these visuals and the slides are to provide a clear understanding of each program individually. Okay, and with that, we will move on to our first tribal applicant. Our first application for review is the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians. Moving forward, I will address this applicant by their acronym of CT-CLUSI. They have an existing program and their total funding request is $103,973. Funding focus is on maintaining existing personnel with a detective role that was previously referred to as a CSO. Additional focus will be on short-term housing and supplies for client stabilization. Clients are diverted from jail bookings, criminal legal involvement, and emergency department admissions. They scored a 78% from their GPOP responses. They assisted an average of 4.2 participants per quarter, with an average of 88 participant follow-up services per quarter. And historically, they have spent just over 96% of their funds. So at this time, we'll take that moment that I mentioned for you to review. And if you have any comments or discussion you would like to have, feel free to discuss as needed.
Thanks, Monty. I wanted to check in with the GRC real quick to kind of orient you to the ask of why we're going through these applications in this way. You know, as both Amani and Jamie mentioned, the reduction methodologies that we are hoping to get your input and action on today, we'll be discussing after all of these applications have been presented. Right now is really an opportunity for members of the Grant Review Committee to ask questions, provide comments, and come to, I guess, a general consensus of, you know, whether or not this program meets the spirit of impacts. I don't think, and Amani and Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that we're anticipating taking any sort of like vote or action on application by application at this time. It's more of an opportunity to soak up information and ask any clarifying questions. And then, you know, later on, we will talk about the actual funding decisions that are to be made. And we're happy to circle back to any of these slides if they're helpful during that time. Thank you.
And I do see a hand raised by Suzanne Shanti. Feel free to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've just looked through all my emails. I didn't get a Google Drive link. So I haven't had a chance to look at all this, but I was wondering if someone could send me one.
Yeah, Judge Shanti, Casey here. So that was included in the application materials ones. I'm happy to resend those to you. I know that there were a couple emails sent, so easy to lose track, but I will get that sent to you now.
Thank you. And if it was only sent to the OJD one, techs are trying to find out why all my emails disappeared. So that would be really
You
great.
got it.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'll make sure to spread it out to several of your email addresses too, so we get through.
All right. Thanks a lot.
I see your hand up as well, Nicholas Hunter. Feel free to unmute.
Awesome. Thank you. I have a question, and maybe this is a question for Will, because Will kind of explained some of the criteria that goes into the GPOP. Specifically, the parts that I'm concerned about get down into, and let me tell you where I'm at, Will. I'm under the Impacts Program Operations section. And under that section, question 17, 18, 19, I'm wondering how these were scored into the GPOP, and what I'm specifically asking, I'll give you a second because I see you looking. You there? Okay. What I'm specifically asking is, this has been one of the biggest questions that we're having around the state right now in what is potential sort of misreporting of numbers. And so this first question here at 17, At what specific point does an individual formally count as a participant in your program? What's the weights given towards the GPOP in this for folks that are requiring something as in forms being filled out, actually enrolling in the program versus this would be an example of basically meaningful interaction even if they don't enroll. So is there a greater weight being given to those that are not considering the person a participant until they are taking some sort of a tangible action, or is that weighted evenly? And then I'll just give you my second one, then you can address it. When we move down there, there's sort of differing. Some are acute programs looking at a couple weeks and then closing those cases versus I think there was another one of sort of 9 months, and then there was another one of sort of they are part of the program, really focused around housing, gainful employment, other things like that. Can you give me a little bit more on how those were weighted into the GPOP?
Sheriff Hunter, of course, thank you for the question and the opportunity to respond. So these items were not included in the GPOP scores. That section that you're talking about was included because in some cases that variation in program design left CJC and our evaluation partners, like we just didn't know. So we included those questions to get a clearer sense of exactly those items, that engagement across time. What are the anticipated engagement goals in terms of time? Is it short-term and acute? So we did not score those items due to the variation in program design, but we did capture them as important information for this GRC and the CJC as we proceed, sir.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you, Will.
Of course.
It is not looking like we have any additional comments or discussion, so I will go ahead and move on to our next applicant. Next for review, we have Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. They have an existing program and their total funding request is $579,787. Funding focus is on a behavioral health administrator position, rental and utility assistance, and expense cards for client stabilization services. Individuals in this program are diverted from jail bookings. They scored a 67% from their GPOP responses. They assisted an average of 26 participants per quarter with an average of 99.2 participant follow-up services per quarter. And historically, they have spent 100% of their funds. Now we will take that moment again just for you to review and discuss as needed. Okay, thank you. If there are no questions or if no one needs additional time to look this over, I will go ahead and move on to the next applicant. Please raise your hand if you do need more time, just so I know not to move forward. Okay, I will go on to the next applicant. Next for review, we have the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs Reservation of Oregon. They have an existing program and their total funding request is $339,902. Funding focus is on maintaining services with 2 existing positions, a recovery mentor and administrative specialist. Additionally, funding will help provide supplies for daily operations to support client needs. Individuals are diverted from jail bookings, other criminal and legal involvement, and emergency department admissions. They scored an 86% from their GPOP responses. They assisted an average of 19 participants per quarter, with an average of 308 participant follow-up services per quarter. And historically, they have spent 87% of their funds. And again, we'll just take a moment for you to review and discuss as needed.
I did want to pop in here to share with the GRC members a little bit about the Money Mountain plot in the top right. You may see or notice that the kind of like dark mustard money dispersed mountain is missing. And that is intentional. So the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs did not request any maintenance funding as part of our 2024 maintenance funding decisions. So there was no additional money dispersed to this particular grantee over this evaluation period, July 1st of 2024 through September 30th of 2025. Instead, they were continuing to spend the money that they had out of their original award. And so that's why you can see that they continued to spend money because they had money, even though additional money was not being dispersed. So just in case that was confusing to any members, I wanted to clarify.
Okay, if we're ready to go, I'll go ahead and move on to the next applicant. All right. The next applicant for review is the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians. They have an existing program and their total funding request is $324,759. Funding focus is on maintaining supports and services with existing positions, a social services intensive care coordinator, and a tribal police officer. Additionally, funds will support housing assistance and supplies for daily operations to meet client needs. And individuals are diverted from jail bookings and emergency department admissions. They scored an 85% from their GPOP responses, and they assisted an average of 50 participants per quarter, with an average of 253 participant follow-up services per quarter. And historically, they have spent 97.8% of their funds. And I will give you all a moment to review. I see Marcia Harnden has a comment. If I pronounce that wrong, please correct me.
No, you're just fine. Thank you. In the past, when we've added either DAs or police officer positions, there's been some comments from the group about how we're tracking their actual involvement in deflection or diversion type programs. Does their application indicate how they will do that as far as what statistics they will supply on the law enforcement position?
I will go ahead and defer to Casey or Will on that question.
Yeah, thanks, Imani. Chief, I'm taking a look into their application budget request right now to see if we have any additional information. It's in that Google Drive link if you want to hop in there with me. But I will say Impacts has funded law enforcement, including tribal police officers before, and they are, of course, there to support the operations of Impact's programs. And I would say that, sometimes, especially in tribal jurisdictions, there are unique needs where folks are wearing a lot of different hats, and it's possible that this tribal police officer is in a unique position to engage and connect with those, potential or existing impacts clients out in the field. So I'm pulling up that budget. Give me one moment. Thanks. Actually, we had our staff do a little deep dive. Thank you, Avery, in the background. So it appears this is an existing position. It's currently CJC, or previously was CJC funded for the Impacts grant. The line item description says the grant also supports funding towards the tribal police for impacts assistance in intensive intervention due to self-harm, harm to others, or transportation. And this is keeping of the original purpose and intent of the grant program. So that seems to me like it would align with, our understanding of how programs are utilizing law enforcement, kind of in that crisis response way, and, getting folks help they need in the moment, even if there is a threat of harm. And it was previously funded by this Impacts GRC. And then in terms of like reporting and seeing, what they would be spending their funding on and the time and everything. All grantees are responsible for quarterly reporting expenditures, to the CJC, and we would be able to see if their funding is, continuing to go to that position. But that is at the extent, taking them at their word of what this request is for. Chief, does that help answer your questions, or should we do some more digging?
No, absolutely. I just want to make sure that they're specialized in some sort of intervention type activities. I think that is in the spirit of the grant. So it does. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And that's a great point about, crisis intervention training being a really great tool for any sort of law enforcement interacting with these high utilizer individuals. So that could be something, leaning towards a best practice in the future. If we see some sort of law enforcement request, maybe 2 years from now, we want to also see some sort of crisis intervention training or credentials being asked for as well.
Thank you, Casey. It does look like we have another hand raised by Stacy Brubaker.
Yes, thank you. I was just curious, and this is really across the board for everyone, not specifically for this application. I was just curious whether there's been any thought into the numbers of how much, some of these grants are really a large amount of money. And if we've done any kind of comparison about how many people are actually getting served and what the cost per individual really is, because I was actually surprised by some of the lower numbers given the amount of money. And so maybe I'm not thinking about it in the right way, but I was just curious whether we've given any thought to how much these interventions and the dollars cost per person, just for a different vantage point, maybe to see the impactfulness of the dollars.
Yeah, Stacy, I'm happy to take that question. So there has, at least as part of the 25-27 applications, that math has not been, those numbers have not been crunched, and that math has not been completed in terms of the cost per historic individual. I would say that that type of cost benefit analysis is critical, but I think this GRC is keenly aware that these high utilizer folks use a lot of resources in the community, and maybe the amount of costs avoided should also be something worth considering in terms of the amount of money spent in a grant towards a couple of folks. I know that even if there are a handful of individuals, maybe a dozen that are being helped over time, it's possible that those folks have hundreds of thousands of dollars that the community is saving by investing the money into connecting those folks to needed supports and treatment. So I would say that is something that we could, monitor over these next 2 years, especially as we're gearing up towards changing the way we do and operate in the CJC for House Bill 3069, and really kind of starting to look at, hey, now that we've defined the operationalization of impact programs and we're beginning to align, what things we want to see in a program, what really is that per person, per individual cost, and take a look into that in the next round of applications, but it was not completed as part of this round.
Okay, even just a projection, I think, helps tell the story a little better.
Noted. Yeah, thank you.
I do see your hand, Paul Solomon. Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, thanks. Just want to follow up on the comments by Stacy and Chief Herndon. So when I went through these applications, I also was struck by kind of the same thing that Stacy noted in the disparity in the numbers served. And it was really, I can tell, apples and oranges sometimes because the programs are so different, but coming down to some kind of common denominator that allows us to evaluate, the effectiveness of an intervention, so that we can better make more informed decisions, I think would be really helpful. And as it relates to the spending on personnel, whether that's officers or equipment, and it's for vehicles, this is something that I've long struggled with pretty much all of the CJC's grant programs. And the fact that sometimes we will see a vehicle put in and we don't know if the vehicle is being used solely for the purposes of the grant, or if an officer is there full-time. In this case, it was, I think, 0.25. So that seems like a reasonable ask. But it does seem to me that it would make sense for us to have some type of reporting criteria that allows us to know that the money we are spending on personnel is actually going to the intended purpose.
Thank you for that. Nicholas Hunter, I see your hand up as well. Feel free to unmute.
Thank you, Amani. No, I just wanted to kind of tie into where Paul and Stacy are at, because this is a concern I have looking at all of these, and I'll get back to kind of some of the comments I made to Will. I think if you look at the individualized programs for each person, and each person is going to have very different needs that need to be accomplished, whether we're into the SUD realm, whether we're into the mental health realm, whether we're talking about both, I think trying to find that individual cost per person is actually going to be quite difficult. The one that gives me greater concern is these when we're have a ton of staff that is a huge cost into what is an acute program causes me concern, because behavioral change is not acute. And so if we are simply a revolving door and we're helping that person in the moment, but that person is continuing to come back over and over again because we are not trying to engage in any sort of long-term treatment or looking for project goals, what are we actually trying to do other than to just be that detox center in the moment? I think that would be criteria that I really want to see, because there are some that are meaningful contact to them is that a deputy had the moment, or an officer met with them on the street and they said, hey, there's some programs that we can get you into if you're willing to engage. And they're calling that a meaningful contact. I don't see how that's a meaningful contact. We've got to be able to get to actual tangible engagement, enrollment in a program, and then be able to see how are those enrollments working and how are those programs working through those enrollments. That's really the data that I want to see, because I agree with Paul, whether it's a vehicle being used for X or Y or how much, I agree with Chief Harnden when she's talking about, do we have officers that are actively engaged, or is this a position where the officer is doing multiple things and really, as far as impacts goes, that's 20% of their time being spent? I think these are difficult number, but to get there, we've really got to be able to look at the programs and the data of what the program is accomplishing. That final question asks, what are we getting at that allows someone to complete the program? And that's another one where if you show up at the door to the stabilization center, we're calling that a complete contact. They showed up to get services. Okay, did they actually engage in services, or did they make it all the way to the door? These are the type of things that we've got to start talking about. If, yes, there are a couple of programs here that are extremely big users of this money, but are they the ones that are actually looking long-term into what those treatment goals look like? Or are they acute programs that are essentially operating as detox centers, which is just recycling folks back into the community and then calling that a win? I have a concern with that.
Thank you, Nicholas. I will just draw attention. I believe this slide took about 10 minutes. Of course, don't want to discourage discussion, but just keeping us on track on time. Are there any other comments or questions before I move forward?
Thanks, Imani. I did want to add an extra comment. I guess looking at this particular slide, I know that we were kind of speaking at large for, all impacts programs, and I think those comments are heard. The cost per participant, I agree with Sheriff Hunter, that's going to be difficult to obtain, but that, it is important. I think that will help us understand bang for buck. I know the legislature would love to see that as well. Paul brings up a great point too. This is not an isolated request to really understand what these personnel are actually accomplishing in their time. I agree that a 0.25 FTE for a tribal officer, that seems reasonable. That's not a full-time officer, dedicated every hour to this work, and it seems like a reasonable ask. But in terms of like the comments about the revolving door, while we do see that maybe in some impacts programs and stabilization centers with detox centers having that like point of contact and that being it, I just wanted to, I guess, note publicly that I don't think that is the case for Cow Creek, which is the slide that we're currently on. And yeah, I see you're shaking your head, Sheriff Hunter, but thought it was worth mentioning for the record. The unique part, I guess, about this tribe, the story that I'm seeing in these Money Mountain plots at the top right, although they have like a low average number of humans served, that total services offered, that line that's, way higher, and it looks like it's averaging at 253.8 according to our little gray boxes below. To me, that tells a story about intensive case management and a few individuals receiving a lot of services over time, and that high need, high acuity, high risk, high utilizer that is being served by a program. So I just wanted to, I guess, draw the contrast that, since we paused on the Cow Creek slide, wanted to make sure that those weren't directly connected to this particular request. Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you, Casey. That does conclude our tribal applications. If we do not have any additional questions or discussion, I'll go ahead and move on to our first county applicant. Okay, the first county applicant that we will review is Clackamas County. They have an existing program and their total funding request is $1,670,282. Funding focus is on maintaining 3 existing positions, as well as expanding by adding a new mental health services position. Additional funding focus is on a short-term and recovery housing, as well as client stabilization supplies. Individuals are diverted from jail bookings, other criminal legal involvement, and emergency department admissions. They scored a 96% from their GPOP responses, and they assisted an average of 44.6 participants per quarter, with an average of 165 participant follow-up services per quarter. And historically, they have spent 99% of their funds. So at this time, I will take a moment for you to review and have any discussion that is needed.
I see that RJ Navarro, you've got your hand raised. Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't mean to keep beating the drum, but we've talked a little bit about how we are incorporating law enforcement into mental health and behavioral health services through this grant. And one thing I noticed with this application is that it seems to fund a lot of services that are a little bit further down in the spectrum of where we're catching people, as opposed to in the very front. And so I'm just wondering, I'm trying to look at this GPOP score and see if that's interpreted, but it doesn't seem like it's coming across, because some of the other tribal grants I feel did a great job of incorporating community-based treatments and services, but they're not getting as high of a GPOP score. Am I reading this score wrong?
When you refer to the GPOP score, are you referring to the raw score and percentage or the established program info? Or both?
Yeah, I'd have to say both, because I don't remember seeing these scores in the grant applications as I was reviewing them. So I'm just trying to understand how we're utilizing these scores now.
Yeah, of course. That's a great question. Will, I will go ahead and defer to you on that one.
Of course. So, RJ, our goal here, right? So we had multiple sections in the GPOP, and some of these items, right, that you're discussing perhaps fell a little bit further in the GPOP, but the entirety of the items that we rated were combined into a single score. And so it could be the case that there are, for example, for Clackamas County, I'm looking at the scorecard and I see that, throughout the sort of coded computer coded ones, and then the qualitative assessments of the responses that they provided. I mean, those did rate well. I absolutely heard your concern. I'm not sure that we captured the data in such a way to sort of to make those determinations that these sets of things fall later in the sort of system of care than others or other applicants. And so, for example, with those evidence-based practices, we were counting those, and the county had a sufficient number to earn the rating. And so I do believe as we proceed, we'll be able to sort of in biennia, we'll be able to gain a clearer understanding of where those scoring thresholds should be. But since this was our first time, we wanted to make sure that we were counting the right things, as well as not sort of weighting things too heavily. And so I just want to make sure that I'm answering your question. I'm not sure that we can, I'm not sure the GPOP was designed to make that specific determination, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands raised, so I will go ahead and move forward to the next county applicant. Our next county applicant is Deschutes County. They have an existing program and their total funding request is $3,502,264. Funding focus is on two categories: personnel and administrative costs. Individuals are diverted from jail bookings, criminal legal system involvement, and emergency department admissions. They scored a 97% from their GPOP responses. They assisted an average of 47 participants per quarter, with an average of 231 participant follow-up services per quarter. And historically, they have spent 99.7% of their funds. At this time, I will go ahead and give you a moment to review. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any comments or questions, so I will go ahead and move to our next county applicant. Okay, our next county applicant is Douglas County. They have an existing program and their total funding request is $1,589,103. Funding will support 8 personnel positions, housing and recovery assistance, and supplies for client stabilization. An additional funding request is for a multi-passenger vehicle to transport participants. Their programming diverts individuals from jail bookings. They scored a 76% from their GPOP responses. They assisted an average of 86 participants per quarter, with an average of 514 participant follow-up services per quarter, and historically have spent 95% of their funds. As you can see, CJC staff did flag a budget line item for Douglas County. We invite you to review the Douglas County budget sheet in the equipment category on line 1. Douglas County originally provided a narrative for a multi-passenger vehicle due to their current vehicle having high mileage and not being reliable. CJC staff completed outreach for clarification on the percentage of vehicle usage for impacts clients. The response received stated, the vehicle would be used 65 hours per month to transport 3 to 5 members per day, and that there was a strong overlap between Clubhouse membership and NPACS participants, but that 100% of vehicle usage would directly support NPACS services. CJC staff is not sure whether that explanation is sufficient and therefore invite the GRC to discuss and advise us on whether this item is an allowable budget line item. And now I will open the floor for you all. It looks like Nicholas was first.
I'll ask, what is Clubhouse participants and how does that relate to impacts?
So it sounds like they have a Clubhouse program and then they serve impacts clients. And it sounds like they're based off of the answer we received, there's no clear percentage as to how much the club members and impact members are being served. If that answers the question.
It does with the ambiguity that they provided in their answer. So I'm not sure that the Clubhouse and that impacts are the exact same thing, but this vehicle seems to be servicing both.
I'm happy to jump in and explain a Clubhouse if that's your question. What the Clubhouse model is really focused on inclusion of individuals who have high mental illness factors who do tend to be involved in the justice system as well, but it really focuses on working, helping them get employment, feeling like they have a place to belong, gives them a meal every day, at least once a day. And it's not just a place they go hang out. They have to be participants in that day as they work through that program to be able to help them have connection back into the community.
Stacey, is that the same staffing then that is sort of working on the impact side, the same staffing is working on the clubhouse side, or are these two sort of?
I doubt it. I don't know enough about it other than to say I believe that the clubhouse is its own 501c3 agency. It's its own nonprofit that works alongside and in coordination with the impacts providers, I assume. I'm just explaining what the clubhouse is. I don't know how Douglas County uses it in relation to impacts.
I appreciate the explanation. I think it leaves me kind of in the same point of ambiguity that we're trying to use a vehicle for two things instead of one, and that's why we're not well defining it.
Yeah, and I think the sheriff gets at exactly the point I was trying to make previously, and I think the response is ambiguous. I am a little confused though, because when I look in the budget narrative, it says 100% of the vehicle's use will directly support impact services, but it sounds like upon follow-up, you got a different response. Is that correct?
We actually got both of those responses at the same time. So the front half of the percentage overlap came in the same email of that 100% of impacts would be supported. So that was kind of why we flagged it as well, because the two sentences together kind of contradict each other. So we just wanted to check with you all.
Did staff follow back up after that response to get any additional clarification?
No. The process that we used for all of the applicants is that we reached out to them. They provided us their answer, and then we moved forward because of the short timing. So the responses that you all have is the response that they gave us. And we did send the budget sheet as well if there was an error that they had made. So they had about a week to respond to us. And that was the response we got.
Okay, well, given the contradictory nature of the responses, I would be reluctant to fund this particular line item in full.
I do see two hands up. I believe Casey was first and then Suzanne.
Thanks, Monty. I echo the comments from Paul and Sheriff Hunter. And Stacey, thank you so much for taking the time to kind of explain the clubhouse model. And I know that Douglas County has implemented their clubhouse, the Chadwick Clubhouse specifically, for the entirety of their impacts program. And I see in their budget sheet, they have 2 personnel that, are going for that clubhouse. They've got $2,000 in rent going there every month for the entirety of the thing. And that, I think all of that sounds really supportive and like a wonderful use of that model. But to me, that's not the entire clubhouse. As I'm reading it, that is a portion of the clubhouse. And I think I can understand the value of a program vehicle for the clubhouse, but I don't know if impacts funds should be the funds that take care of the entirety of that vehicle. It sounds to me like staff, offered an opportunity to clarify what percentage of that vehicle would be used and, maybe allow the county to adjust the request in response to that percentage to pay for a portion of that vehicle. And that seems like those changes were not made.
Suzanne Shanti, feel free to unmute and speak at this time.
Thanks. Well, I was just looking at the budget too, and there's $48,000 for the clubhouse, which now I have a little bit better understanding of this. Sounds like maybe, I don't know, the clubhouse serves non-impact clients as well as impact clients. I don't know how they distinguish between those, but it does raise the additional issue that Paul and Sheriff Hunter have commented on, which is like how much of this 48,000 goes to impact people? Like, what's the proportion? Did they just agree, we'll give you 48,000? Do they have it? Or is there any connection between the amount of service that impacts people get to the Chadwick Clubhouse? The Chadwick Clubhouse, by the way, looks like it's a great program in terms of what they say they do. So maybe it's okay just to say, well, it could include all these impacts folks, because clearly the people it serves would be potential high utilizers, not necessarily, but potentially. So that's just another follow-up question. And it's just, you know, if I understand this right, we dissolve in July and you guys are in charge, right? CJC, our committee is over. If that's the case, then I'll just urge you to, not in just this program, but overall, there seems to be, it's again, trying to hone how much of the money that's going into these programs is actually serving the population and how much of it is just being spread out. So it's not clear for me now, this $48,000 rent and all this stuff supports the rent and utilities of the clubhouse. So it's not just an impacts program. The clubhouse is getting some money from impacts to support their own program, it sounds like, but no link about how many people or anything. So that's all, just another comment along the same lines. I think there needs to be, as we hone down on what are the best practices that we can maybe leverage up across the state, which is how this all started. How can we get the biggest bang for our dollars and make sure that the grant money is serving the population that has been targeted?
Thank you. I see your hand up, Nicholas. Really quickly, we are at around 8 minutes, and it does sort of sound like we may be at a consensus to remove this line item. So I just wanted to check in if you would like to comment more, or if we may want to see if we can just move forward with removing this as unallowable.
I'm going to keep it really, really short, but I do want to make a comment. So
Yeah, of course.
I'm not anti-vehicles. So we, through 5204, actually expanded our LEAD program, and we got this same scrutiny over a vehicle that is used 100% of the time by my outreach team. That is 100% of the time doing outreach. And that's what bothers me more here, is the inability for them just to specify that this is what the vehicle is going to be used for this purpose only. That's the issue I have. It's not with the equipment request, because there are a lot of folks that do need this equipment to continue running their programs. But I also believe that they need to be transparent in what they're using the vehicle for. Thank you, Amani.
Of course, thank you. So moving forward, like I said, it sort of sounds like we may have a consensus. I don't know if you all would like to do a voice vote, or if we can just agree that we have a consensus to remove it. Just go ahead and let me know how you would like to move forward, and we will take that route.
I'm seeing some thumbs up. I think it's appropriate to say that we have consensus and can move forward. Maybe just for the record, we'll note that staff will remove the line item in question, and maybe Amani, could you restate the line item specifically so we can have it on record?
Yes, the line item specifically that will be removed, one moment, will be the Douglas County equipment category on line 1. I don't have the specific, but it was a multi-passenger vehicle.
Quick question.
Yes.
So if we are removing that 40,000, does that 40,000 then go back into the pool of available funds that we'll have, since we are going to have to make some reductions today?
Yes, it will.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So I will now pass it on to Jamie, who will finish the rest of our county applicant review.
Thanks, Amani. All right, the next applicant is Hood River County. They are an existing program, and with their budget request, they plan to expand their program by adding a peer navigator and case manager, 2 new impacts dedicated vehicles and supplies for support services. Their GPOP responses indicate they divert from prosecutions, formal sanctions, and revocation proceedings. They scored a 61% from their GPOP responses, assisted an average of 2 participants per quarter, with an average of 16 participant services, per quarter, and historically have spent 100% of their funds. I'll now pause so that you can review this information, ask any questions. Paul Solomon, I see your hand is raised.
So this comes back to the comment that Stacy made earlier about how we're evaluating the cost per participant. When I looked at this one, I think they said in my notes that they had served 9 people over the prior funding cycle. And we had other projects. I'll use Lincoln County as an example that had about the same size budget of about $460,000, and it served 80 people. And I know they're very different programs, but it does strike me when we are looking at the cost and our ability to use these dollars in the most efficacious manner possible, that we need to figure out some type of common denominator for evaluating whether it's the cost per person or the service or something. So I just want to flag that as something that caught my eye.
Thank you. Judge Shanti, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, this just goes to, I think my position has gelled a lot, especially since the last report from the researchers, which is, I think we're getting to the point where we have to figure out what are the best practices and then start paying the programs to do those best practices. Because we've now, I don't know, we're 6 years in, is it? Where we've given all the money, we've given all the counties the chance to do it the way that they think. And it's probably time to start crunching what are the practices that work. And I know that the program started, well, every county is different, and that's true. But the whole goal of it, as I understood it from its inception, was to see what we could leverage and build up based on best practices. So I would urge the commission, Paul, you'll be there. I would urge the commission in your next effort, because we'll be dead, this committee will be gone, to really start just like an adult drug court. That's how we started when I was first a judge, was we started looking at best practices, and ding by ding, we started, CJC at that time was in charge of the funding, and we started identifying the best practices, and the programs that were doing the best practices got the money. So that's, I'm not dinging Hood River. It's definitely its own thing. But at some point, we've got to make use of all this research and all the data and all the money and try to come up with something that we can leverage. And I think we're about there now, in my opinion.
Thank you, Judge Shanti. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so if there aren't any further comments or questions, we can proceed to the next applicant.
Actually, I have one other question, and this is for Will. And I see the GPOP score on this application was 61%, pretty low. Can you say a little bit about why this program scored so low, and if it had anything to do with the number of people that they're serving?
Hi, Paul. Of course, thank you so much for the question and for the opportunity to respond. So looking specifically at Hood River County's scorecard, there were a number of places in the GPOP scorecard where their points were not earned. In section 2, we did not see where there were substantive goals and plans to target the health system's high utilizers. We also saw where there were fewer participant identification options in both system lists and encounters. There were a few items in section 3, sort of programmatic items, such as providing those needs assessments, the individual treatment planning screening tools. And then it was the lack of substantive plans to divert from the jail and ED. So each of those things were opportunities where Hood River could, had their response been different or had their program plan been slightly different, could have earned a few more points in the GPOP scorecard, sir.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Will, while you're at it, because maybe I missed it, what's the maximum GPOP score that someone could achieve?
Yes, sir, Sheriff. Thank you for the question. The maximum raw score is 47 points.
Thank you.
And Judge Shanti, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, this,
Oh, you're muted.
I'm looking,
You're muted again, Judge.
I'm looking at the amounts that they're asking for personnel, and they've got 2 peer navigators and a case manager. 127,000, 142,000. I'm assuming last year's budget was similar, or last round was similar. So what are these case managers doing when there's 9 people in the program? What are the peer navigators doing? These are 100% full-time employees. What are they doing when they don't have the people to serve? I'm assuming they're doing something, but it's another one of those issues about what is the connection between what the money is going to and what work is being done. I can't see with 9 people that's a full-time job for these folks. So anyway, Janie, you have an idea about what peer navigators are doing full-time, or maybe it's not a full-time thing, but it looks like from what they're saying in the budget, it is. Anyway, it's just another one of those things to raise a question about that you guys will have to figure out, I guess.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judge Shanti. I'd love to respond to that one and clarify that those positions did not exist. So what Hood River's program was previously was a seasonal shelter and a couple of reserve beds, and that was it. And they have, listened to best practices. They've gone through and met with other programs to see how could they change their program to be more like what is working for Impact, to get more clients. I think they self-selected and recognized that they needed to do a change. So the positions, as noted in the bottom left of the slide here, are part of their program expansion idea. They want to add a peer navigator, add case manager, and add some additional positions there. So I think that this is more of a change and an addition, and it's totally reasonable that we would have questions about, well, what are these folks actually doing with this money? And I think that the answer might be, we don't know just yet, since this is a new request.
Thank you so much. I should have seen that.
Janie Gullickson, looks like you're next.
Thank you. That additional information was helpful. I did want some clarity on that middle, or I guess top of the established program info. Is that the number of people served?
It is an average.
So two
of
people?
participants served per quarter.
Okay, thank you. But
You're
this is that those are current numbers, not projected with the added staff they're proposing, right?
That's
Historical. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
historical.
Thank
And
you.
just to clarify too, I think it was with their seasonal model, they had 2 beds available. And so 2 individuals maybe filled those beds during that seasonal operation.
Thank you, that helps.
I will note we are over 6 minutes, so just making a little note about time. Paul Solomon, I see your hand
Yep.
is raised.
Quick comment. So I notice in their budget request that they're asking for 2 program vehicles. I'm really struggling with this, given one, the number of people that they've served in the past, and I get that they're making some changes in the program, but that does not seem like a reasonable request to me.
I will just note for the record, staff did reach out to this applicant as well, and they did provide the narrative that those 2 vehicles would be used 100% of the time for NPACS clients. So that's the reason why this one was not flagged, even though it has the vehicles on there. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Thank you, Amani. All right, if there are no further questions or discussions, comments, I believe we can move on to the next applicant.
I'm
Oh.
sorry, I have to butt in Judge Shanti again. So at the end, we're gonna decide, are we doing a haircut? Are we, like, how are we gonna do this? We've
Yes.
already nixed 1 vehicle. I'm gonna propose, like Hood River, it seems like with the added information, they might be doing a whole different program and we can't really even go on their past performance. So I'd hate for them not to have a vehicle if they needed to do services, but I think 2 vehicles is way too many. I mean, they're just starting, so why don't they see what they get? And so I would propose, at least right now, cutting the 1 vehicle. Now, maybe at the end, we're gonna go back and we're gonna like micromanage every one of these and cut what we think is not right. And if that happens, I guarantee we will not be done today, which is fine by me. We're probably not going to be done today anyway. But if we're going to do the haircut thing or some other, more block how we do it instead of individual cutting, then I would think that I would be more comfortable with at least getting rid of the 1 vehicle. Even though they say it's going to be used 100% of the time, I don't know how they know that because they don't know what their program is going to really look like.
Sheriff Hunter, I see your hand. Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Sheriff.
Not very helpful. Okay, so I do have a little bit of info on Hood River. So Hood River is one of those, and this is just a little bit of background because it's coming up. But Hood River is one that originally, when we looked at the deflection money, they fell at the very bottom of the scale on the deflection money. So they were combining with Wasco and some others to build that program. And so I think that program has been in existence, and then this is another potential funding source that they're trying to do to grow that program. So I think that's why there are some numbers that already exist and other things like that. It is a small program that actually is involving more than 1 county in this whole thing, but it becomes it was very difficult for the counties in that area to work with the initial funding that they got on deflection, and that they were looking for other funding sources to supplement that. Even though they got a bump in the last deflection cycle, it still was not enough to actually substantially run a program. So I do not want to get to Judge Shanti and the vehicles. That's a separate subject, but this is Hood River and sort of others trying to build what they can in that gorge area.
Thank you, Sheriff. All right, in the sake of time, we should move on to the next applicant.
I just want to jump in and say I'm going to abstain from this. This is my county and we would be the contractor, so I am just going to abstain and recuse myself.
Thank you. All right, the next applicant is Jackson County. They are a new applicant, and with their budget request, they plan to hire a project coordinator, data analyst, program manager, and office specialist, and purchase case management software. Their GPOP responses indicate they plan to divert from jail bookings all points of the criminal legal system and the Oregon State Hospital. They scored a 93% from their GPOP responses, and because they are a new applicant, they do not yet have established program information or historical spending patterns. I'll now pause for you so that you can review this information and ask any questions. All right, seeing no comments or questions, we can proceed to the next applicant. The next applicant is Lane County. They are an existing program, and with their budget request, they plan to maintain their program through funding 12 staff positions, education and training for staff certifications and licensing, emergency shelter, rental assistance, client support, and office supplies. Their GPOP responses indicate they divert from jail bookings, emergency department, and the Oregon State Hospital, and other criminal legal involvement. They scored a 93% from their GPOP responses, assisted an average of 46 participants per quarter, with an average of 329 participant services per quarter, and historically have spent 94.8% of their funds. Staff did flag Lane County due to a line item in their budget request needing GRC input. Under training and associated travel, line item 1 is titled Continued Education and is for reimbursing staff for annual trainings required for their respective certifications and licenses. In the narrative, Lane County states the county does reimburse staff for these expenses, and CJC staff did not receive sufficient information to make a determination about it being supplanting of funds and wanted to bring it before the GRC for further discussion. I'll now pause for you. Paul, I see your hand.
So one, for the record, I will probably wind up abstaining on the vote on Lane County. No longer live in Lane County, but I contract with Lane County, so I just want to be clean about the vote. But this does strike me as potentially supplanting. Given the response, I would suggest that we strike this particular line item from their request.
Thank you. Alicia Beamer, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, I will just, I am a member of Lane County, so I will abstain from voting on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge Shanti, I see your hand.
I agree with Paul. We should get rid of that. It looks like a supplant. And I live in Lane County. I'm now a senior judge, so I'm not an elected official there. I love Lane County and what it's trying to do. I have always been concerned about the cost of its personnel. And even with the numbers that they're projecting that they've served, I have a hard time understanding how all these people working full-time are needed to serve 48 people completely and 329 totally. That is a lot of people that they have on the payroll. I don't actually believe that all that these people are doing is dedicated to Impact's grant. I don't see how it happens. I don't know how you guys are going to get at that, but this is just an example I've been talking about. Again, I love Layton County. I love what they're trying to do, but even when they're doing a good job, otherwise you just got to look at, is the money actually being spent on the program that the grant is designed to fund? And I have my doubts about this. I could be totally wrong, but I don't see it. So anyway, that's my comment for later when we're voting, but I do think to now, maybe we could just vote and see if people are in agreement about getting rid of that request, that added request.
Co-Chair Beck, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you. I have no other comments on the flag. I echo what folks have said. I think it's worth, striking. I did want to respond to Judge Shanti's comment, though, about the 12 staff positions. Lane County, they operate the forensic intensive treatment team. That is like their impacts program, and 12 staff positions are quite a few staff positions, but I can confirm, at least historically, those have all been dedicated to impacts, the highest of high utilizers in Lane County. So that was not a flag for me when I was reviewing this application. Those existing positions and maintenance of those existing positions made sense for the operation of Lane County's program.
Great. Thank you for telling me that. That does my heart good.
All right, so it sounds like we're maybe coming to a consensus about removing that line item from their budget. I see head shaking, yes.
Jamie, would you
Roger,
mind
For the
restating the
record,
line item for
yeah,
the record?
exactly.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Yeah, that would
Jeez.
be helpful to be clear.
Yes,
exactly what
absolutely.
we're removing and the reason.
So it's under training and associated travel. Line item 1, it's titled continued education, and it's for reimbursing staff for annual trainings required for their respective certifications and licenses. Okay, I'm seeing head shaking yes to remove. Thumbs up. Perfect. Thank you. That is helpful for my eyes to see. All right, so staff will make those changes. The next applicant is Lincoln County. They are an existing program, and with their budget request, they plan to maintain their program through funding a lead navigator and data analyst, short-term housing, cell phones, and bus passes. Their GPOP responses indicate they divert from law enforcement contact, jail bookings, and post-release reentry. They scored a 78% from their GPOP responses, assisted an average of 21 participants per quarter, with an average of 126 participant services per quarter, and historically have spent 100% of their funds. I will now pause for you to review this information. All right, seeing no comments or questions, we can proceed to the next applicant. The next applicant is Morrow and Umatilla counties, which applied as a regional consortium. They are an existing program, and with their budget request, they plan to maintain their program through funding for staff, emergency housing, car insurance and fuel, office supplies, client supplies, and team trainings. Their GPOP responses indicate they divert from jail bookings, community correction sanctions, the emergency department, and Oregon State Hospital. They scored a 96% from their GPOP responses, assisted an average of 21 participants per quarter, with an average of 157 participant services per quarter, and historically have spent 70% of their funds. I'll now pause for you to review this information. All right, if there are no comments or questions, we can proceed to the next applicant. The next applicant is Multnomah County. They're an existing program, and with their budget request, they plan to maintain their program through funding 7 staff, continuing education for certifications, program and office supplies, peer engagement, and training. Their GPOP responses indicate they divert from the Oregon State Hospital, incarceration, and other criminal legal involvement. They scored a 65% from their GPOP responses, assisted an average of 48 participants per quarter, with an average of 275 participant services per quarter, and historically have spent 79% of their funds. I'll now pause for you to review this information.
Go ahead, Chief Herndon.
A quick question. Their historical spending for probably one of the more high needs counties in the state, did they provide an explanation as to how they only got to just under 80% spending?
Will, are you able to provide that information? Or Casey?
I'm afraid I will not be. I would have to defer to Co-Chair Beck.
Yeah, thanks, Will. I think that while there was no like particular explanation provided, with historical context to the operation of Multnomah County's program, they were slow to start. Difficult hiring folks and getting their, program like fully operational and up and running. So I think we only have assumption really to base off of Chief Herndon, but that would be my take on it.
Okay, it'd be good to have an explanation about maybe they have a plan to make sure that we are spending moving forward. I get the hiring part. It's the same in, I think, many counties. But again, that's money we're leaving on the table, so to speak. So I want to make sure that we're being responsible for allocation. I'd love to see a plan from them about how do they get their spending up around 90%.
I think that's a great point. And again, thinking about the future of impacts with being part of the local public safety grant as part of House Bill 3069, I would say that there will be checkpoints probably built in at the halfway point of a biennium and at the full point of if you are not on track with your spending, you may have to give some of that money back. So that will be a mechanism that we can use in the future. But I agree, this left a lot of money that could have been going to other programs who were running out of money. And maybe it's something that we as a GRC need to consider in terms of Multnomah County's request this time around.
Thank you, Casey. All right, if there are no other comments or questions, we can proceed to the next applicant. Oh, Janie Gullickson, I see your hand raised.
I apologize for the last minute jump in. I do have one question, and I'm not sure if I can provide some clarity on this since I am the executive director of the peer company that is the proposed vendor. Am I allowed to comment?
I would say that's probably up to you, Janie, just in terms of actual or potential conflicts. If you are planning to abstain from the vote for Multnomah County at the end,
Yes.
I would probably encourage you to abstain from discussion.
Okay, thank you. I will abstain.
Thank you. All right, we can proceed to the next applicant. The next applicant is Union County. They're an existing program, and with their budget, they plan to maintain their program through funding for staff and medications for uninsured clients. Their GPOP responses indicate they divert from jail bookings, parole and probation, revocation and sanctions, prosecution, and the emergency department. They scored a 76% from their GPOP responses, assisted an average of 17 participants per quarter with an average of 187 participant services per quarter, and historically have spent 87% of their funds. I'll now pause so that you can review this information. All right, if there are no questions or comments, we can proceed to the next applicant. The next applicant is Wasco County. They are an existing program, and with their budget request, they plan to maintain their program through funding the La Casa Vida housing program. Their GPOP responses indicate they divert from child welfare involvement, law enforcement referral, pre-charge, pre-adjudication with jails, courts, and probation, and the emergency department. They scored an 82% from their GPOP responses, assisted an average of 2 participants per quarter with an average of 10 participant services per quarter, and historically have spent 97% of their funds. And I'll pause so that you can review this information. Co-Chair Beck.
Hi, Jamie. Thank you. I don't want to cut the Wasco County discussion short in case there is any comments or questions that we need to talk about. But I am hoping to circle back to a point. So I guess when we've concluded the Wasco County discussion, I'd love to revisit Multnomah County briefly.
Okay. I'm not seeing any comments or questions for Wasco County. Coach Arbeck, would you like us to go back to the Multnomah County slide?
Yes, please. Thanks you so much. Thanks, Jamie. So we had some staff working in the back, and I wanted to bring to the GRC's attention the total request for Multnomah County, $537,600, was significantly less than what they were awarded last time. And I'm saying significantly. So their total award from the last grant cycle was $1,884,778.01. So having spent 80% of that over the course of the entire grant period, it, to me, I guess it was worth bringing up that maybe they did adjust their request, their ask, in terms of how much money they were actually spending of their award. And the $537,600 was significantly less than that previous one. So I wanted to bring that up for the group.
This is Chief Harnden. I appreciate that. And sitting on other grant committees across the state, that's a significant factor to consider, that they've adjusted their ask based on what they think they can spend. So I appreciate the back end work by the team.
Thanks, CJC staff.
Mhm.
Right. Jamie, those are my only additional comments for Multnomah County. Thank you for letting me interrupt.
Yeah, of course. All right, then I think we can proceed. So that concludes the overview of all 15 applications. We'll now transition into award decisions. First, we will provide you with an overview of available funding, followed by budget reduction strategies and staff recommendations. This section will conclude with the GRC voting on the proposed reduction strategies to determine final award amounts for applicants. As we begin discussions of reduction strategies, as a reminder, there is $10,784,160 of available funds, which means you, the GRC, must decide on a strategy to reach a reduction amount of $3,978,078. The middle vertical column of numbers shows the available funding with the 10% tribal set-aside amount, while the furthest vertical column to the right shows the total budget request amounts from tribal governments and county applicants.
I've got a quick question about that slide.
Yes.
Does that slide reflect the reductions that we've made on those counties with ineligible items? Because it seems to me that if it doesn't, we're going to have to rejigger the numbers at some point to reflect the actual request amounts that are eligible.
Yes, they are removed.
Okay, so this number, the 3,978,000, reflects those changes.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you. The staff is working very hard in the background. All right, so today we have 2 action items. The tribal government request amount exceeds the 10% set aside funds of 200 and, oh, sorry, I apologize. We have 2 action items before you today. First action is going to be whether to meet or exceed that tribal set aside funding. And the second action is going to be to deciding on a reduction strategy for the available funding. So the tribal government requested amount exceeds the 10% set aside funds by $270,003. This is our first action item today. As the GRC, there are a couple ways to move forward. Option A is to maintain the set aside amount and not meet the total requested funds from tribal governments. This means the tribal request would be reduced by $270,003, or option B, exceed the set-aside amount by $270,003 to fully fund the tribal application requests. The remaining funding for county applicants would be reduced by $270,003. Staff's recommendation is to proceed with option B, to exceed the set-aside amount for tribes and fully fund tribal government applicant requests. I'll now pause for discussion. Alicia Beamer, I see your hand. Oh, you are muted.
Yes, thank you. I've been on this since 2020 and the inception, and honestly, one of the things I've been most proud of on the work of this committee is that we have always fully funded the tribes, and that was really robust discussion for those of you who were in the 2020 discussions on this. So I would definitely support option B on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, I see your hand.
Really quickly, I did just want to call out, we noticed a staff typo. On option B, the first typed amount says 273,000. The correct amount is $270,003, like the other spots in the PowerPoint. So I just wanted to call that out. Thank you.
Thanks, Monty.
Yeah, I was just hoping that staff could provide a little more context around their recommendation and why they are suggesting that we choose option B. And I appreciate Alicia's comments as well.
I could speak a little bit towards that. While figuring out the reduction strategies, we did the math, and we were able to figure that because the county requests were much larger, reducing the tribal government requests by that amount would reduce one of them by about 50%, where if we reduced it out of the county because the ask was so large, it would be a much more minor reduction. So that was just part of the reason. Casey, Jamie, feel free to step in if there was anything else that I'm leaving out.
No, Amani, that was so helpful. I would just echo Alicia's statements earlier that historically, I think this grant review committee has been very cognizant of the different discrete needs of tribal communities and what the startup costs and operational costs might differ. And I think that I know that through every application cycle, we have met the tribal set-aside amount or exceeded it amount. It has been, I would say, negligible difference. I think just a couple $100,000 over the previous times. I don't have the exact amounts at hand, but I think historically this GRC has recognized that the tribal communities, know their needs, and they have discretely different needs than those of counties, and we, basically trust that they trust what they need.
Judge Shanti, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm echoing what was just said about the historical view that we've held of when we've talked about tribal funding. And way back in 2020, when we talked about it, we also recognized that traditionally tribes have not been included in the same way in opportunities for grants, and also that their ability to secure other funding is different than the ability of counties to secure other funding. And to me, one of the best things we've done in this committee is to fully fund or exceed the funding of the tribal requests and to support them. And I want to also say, since this might be our last meeting, that our staff have done a great job with the conciliation process. And it's just a highlight of being on this committee, the attention that has been paid to the tribes. And again, my history, working in Oregon, that has not always been the case. So I really super appreciate it. And I vote to fully fund what they've asked for.
Amani, do you have motion language prepared for this? I'd be prepared to make a motion. if we're
So
ready to-
for today, we don't need any motions, so hooray for that. But it does sound like we're coming to a consensus. So if the GRC is ready to vote, first we will need to confirm that we have quorum. Lindsay, could you please check our attendance?
We do have quorum.
Marvelous. All right, so first we'll begin with abstentions. First, are there any abstentions to funding for choosing option B? Exceed the set aside amount by $270,003 to fully fund the tribal applicant requests.
Dr. Stanfill, I will abstain, being as I'm the trial.
Thank you. All right, so will all GRC members in favor of option B say yes or aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes. Hi.
Will all GRC members who oppose option B say no or nay? All right, Lindsay, I'm assuming you were able to capture those votes. Marvelous, thank you. All right, we can proceed to the next slide.
So Jamie, just to confirm, it does sound like the vote carried and we are moving forward with exceeding the tribal set aside amount by that $270,003.
Yes, yes, you are ahead of the game. So yes, to confirm, the GRC has decided to choose option B, which is to exceed the set aside amount by $270,003 to fully fund the tribal application requests. Now that we have decided on tribal applicant funding, we will now dive into the 2 staff recommended reduction strategies. These include what we're calling a hybrid uniform reduction and GPOP tier. We will first start with a hybrid uniform reduction, and I will pass it back to Amani.
Hello again, everyone. I am going to take a brief moment. We've had staff working in the background since we reduced some of those line items. So I need to stop sharing and reshare an updated PowerPoint. Give me a minute or two. Okay, please let me know when it comes on your screens.
It's up.
Perfect, thank you. I'm just gonna switch to the slide that we were on. Just kidding. It will not click on there, so bear with me. Okay. We're ready. Co-Chair Beck, committee members, and the materials shared with you ahead of today's meeting, staff included several considerations for reduction methodologies Since that time, staff has continued analysis of the benefits and drawbacks of each option and worked to find the most effective and feasible options. As such, staff have prepared 2 recommendations for the GRC to consider today. The first funding methodology we would like to present is the hybrid uniform reduction. In the materials shared with the GRC, staff referred to this first reduction as a haircut. Note that the steps previously listed remain the same. It's just a name change to better suit this particular reduction methodology. There are a few steps involved in this strategy, so should you all choose to move forward with it. First, any expenses deemed unallowable will be removed from county budgets. Earlier, you all voted to exceed the set aside and fund tribal applicant request in full, so that will be the second step. Lastly, in order to distribute the remaining funds to all county applicants, county funding requests will receive an equal percentage reduction, resulting in county applicants receiving 70% of their requests. Please note Douglas County and Multnomah County both had unallawables initially cut from their requests, which is why their total percent funded falls below that 70% that everybody else would receive. Of course, this strategy has benefits and it has drawbacks. Importantly, it provides a portion of funding for all applicants. It preserves budget categories and it allows for county applicant budget autonomy. Applicant budget autonomy means that after contracting, the applicants would have the ability to choose what to preserve and what to cut from their original budgets. They would submit a budget adjustment request to move funds to the approved line items to meet the needs of their respective programs. A drawback to this strategy is that it only funds county applicants at 70% of their total requests, meaning no county applicant will receive full funding. This could significantly affect the scope and capacity for most programs. It also does not take into consideration their GPOP scores, historical data, or working towards more alignment among program operation. Of course, those are just a few benefits and drawbacks, and you all may come up with more during discussion. Would you like to discuss this strategy now, or would you like me to present the second option for you to consider?
I think it might be helpful to see the second option and then discuss after we've seen both options.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
I agree.
Okay. Okay, so the second staff recommended reduction strategy is what we refer to as the GPOP tier. Previously, the GRC provided feedback that you would like a tool to utilize additional program information as a means of understanding and rating applicant programs. This reduction strategy is meant to take that feedback into account. Similar to the other reduction strategy, the first 2 steps will be to remove any expenses deemed unallowable and exceed the tribal set-aside amount to fully fund those tribal requests. The second step would be to remove line items that are defined as new positions, existing positions not previously funded by the CJC, and the training and associated travel budget category. Note that the removal of new positions would not apply to Jackson County since they are a new applicant. Step 3 would be to reduce all equipment and supplies requests by 50% and county budgets. Once those reductions have been applied across the board, then county applicants will be ranked by their GPOP scores and funds will be awarded starting from the top of the list, with the highest ranking applicant being funded at the highest level first, and then moving down towards the bottom of the list until all available funds are depleted. The table to the right does show what the awards would be if you chose to move forward with this strategy. Just like the other strategy, this one also has multiple benefits and drawbacks. The benefits of this strategy are that it preserves the budget categories that are critical to program operation, such as personnel, direct services, housing, and admin budget categories. Additionally, it takes into account previous feedback and considers the proposed program operation through GPOP scores. The drawbacks of this strategy include the fact that with limited funds available, not all applicants can be funded with this method. Further, the applicants that are funded through this method are potentially going to receive line item or category removals or reductions that they did not choose. This strategy focuses on maintaining programs rather than expanding them. A guiding question to consider when making a reduction decision today is whether the goal of the committee is to provide funding to as many applicants as possible, or whether your goal is to take into account applicant GPOP scores and award applicants based on aligned program operation and performance while preserving some categories but not all. And with that, I will open the floor for all of you to have discussion. Let me know if you need me to switch back and forth between either of the slides. Alicia Beamer, I see your hand raised. Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, I just wonder, the other part of the whole impacts grant funding is the percentage for the data collection, right? And so where do those funds fall into here? I mean, is there a way, I mean, especially as we're sunsetting this and moving forward in a different way, how those funds get allocated, is there an opportunity? And then really making sure that those funds help support future development and best practice and identifying that so that we can continue to advocate to get these programs in place in the future. I just don't see that we've shaved off any on there either. And maybe we can't because it's required, but is there a way to support in a different way?
Casey, I refer to you on that question.
Yeah, thanks, Amani. So Alicia, that decision for, I guess you're right. It is a statutory amount, 3% set aside for evaluation and I believe technical assistance. And that was taken off the top back in December when the tribal set aside amount was also decided upon by the GRC. So the total amount that we were working with today was with consideration to that the evaluation has already been set aside, taken care of, and that that 10% tribal set aside amount had been set aside. And then, today we made the decision to exceed that amount. So the funding that remains, which I can't remember, Amani, if we had on a previous slide, but I think it was around like 9 million. That was what was going to be applied here to the counties. And then just wanted to acknowledge your thoughts on the evaluation really going towards, seeing what's happening in these programs in a data way. That will absolutely continue. REDCap is fully on board, monitored by our partners at OHSU. That will continue. Those funds support that. And in addition, with the operationalization that was offered by the GPOP, the Grant Program Operation Profile, we will be able to really monitor how programs are adhering to their plans and, what they're measuring and how they're measuring it. We will be able to examine over the course of the next 2 years as we, continue closer to that House Bill 3069 change where impacts will become part of the larger grant program, the Local Public Safety Coordination Grant. And I think that working towards the true spirit of impacts and, kind of what Judge Shanti said earlier about kind of like the model that we've been kind of whittling away at, that's where we're getting here. So I think that answers your questions.
It looks like next up would be Janie.
Thank you. I am curious about all the program proposals that include clinical staff at 100% funded by impacts. And what I'm curious about is if there's any portion of those clinical providers that can be billed to Medicaid, not in whole, but in part. And I may not understand the barriers as to why that was not proposed in the first place. And I couldn't gather it from the actual proposals themselves. So I'm wondering if anyone might have any insight on that. Because that might save some costs.
I don't have any specific insight on why they don't have the ability to bill that to Medicaid. There may be someone on the committee that can provide that information, but what I will say is any reduction that we apply to one county will have to be applied to every other county. So if we reduce any personnel or percentage of personnel to one county, that could affect another county that really needs that personnel that they have listed, but we would not be able to just apply it to only one county. It looks like Paul, you would be next.
Actually, I think Sheriff Hunter's ahead of me.
Oh, you are so right. I apologize, Sheriff Hunter. You will be next.
I figured we were all on the same screen, so it didn't matter. I think the only concern that I have, looking at the model that's currently on the screen, the GPOP, I think we've had a fair amount of discussion, hearing what sort of Judge Shanti said about we should be getting to a portion where we know more identifiers that we want to be paying attention to and the programs should be adhering to. But has that been made clear to all of the programs so that they know what the GPOP score, what is influencing that, creating that value? Because right now, putting weight, I'm not sure how we put that much weight on the GPOP score. I'm not sure if that is a fair evaluation of a program and then start making cuts after it. I hear everybody on the tribal side and that we want to ensure we're funding our tribal partners, but we do have to be very cognizant and recognize that one of our tribal partners has a very low GPOP score. And so if we separate the two of them and we're going to evaluate GPOP on one side, but fully fund on the other side, I have an issue with that we're not, even though we're trying to fund that program, we're not asking them to adhere to the same things that are influencing that GPOP score. And so I have a bit of cognitive dissonance with that. So I'm not sure if the other, I don't remember what the last slide said with the haircut slide or something. I'm just not sure that the GPOP is a fair way to evaluate, because I'm not sure we can totally stand behind that and say that this is the score that is saying how well these programs are in fact doing, and this is why one program is being funded over another.
Thank you. Paul, you would be up next.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, these are really difficult decisions either way we go. And I appreciate the sheriff's comments. And I also struggle with just giving a straight 70% haircut across the board without taking into consideration any factors around the quality of the application, numbers served, any of those things. And I'm mindful of the fact that, you know, we have to be good stewards of the state's limited public resources. And we're going into a period of what I believe will be fiscal contraction over, you know, the coming biennium. So I think the GPOP tiering is harsh, but if I were to have to make a decision, I think I would lean that way over just giving everybody a haircut without taking into consideration any factors around their applications.
Thank you, Paul. Judge Shanti, it looks like you had your hand up next.
Yeah, thanks. I don't like either one of them, of course. The GPOP one bothers me for a couple reasons. One is, like, just for an example, Hood River, I'm assuming that some of its GPOP was lowered. It's really a new program. Although Jackson has a new program and it got a higher score, so maybe I'm wrong about that. But I have always been, because of my drug court work, cognizant that different counties have different resources for making applications. Some people are dedicated to do it. Other people just come in and try their best. So I'm a little not happy just with the, let's just go purely that way. I do think things like how many people have you served and other things like that might be helpful, but I don't know why down here on one of the strategies, which you didn't, you gave us 2 strategies, but there's another one. GRC chooses budget categories to preserve, then an equal percentage reduction applied to the other budget categories across all applications. Now I realize that this puts a lot of responsibility on the GRC, but they're going to have the whole thing in a few months. So why isn't that an option, and what could someone flesh out that option?
Yeah, I could answer your last question. So staff did additional work on the options that we provided, and for timing's sake, just presented the 2 that we felt were the best options. But we do have the ability to work out any other choices that the GRC would like us to work through. We would just need to take a break to get those final numbers, and we would need you all to tell us what route you would like to go or what reduction strategy you would like to use.
All right, so this was just because of the timing, not because you don't think that that category, have the GRC turn the budget categories and then staff does the rest.
Yes,
and,
there was
and then my
no-
final question, just leading back into this, is what if the GRC is making this decision in the future, what would the decision be by the GRC? I mean, not the GRC, but by the staff and the commission, the CJC. I don't know how you guys are going to make these decisions, but I'm assuming that there's going to be something where the staff makes a decision about how this funding goes.
I don't want to jump ahead of people, but maybe Casey, you could talk about the previous CJC decisions on the deflection programs and how that was put essentially to a point scale and a weighted scale. Because I'm going to guess that this is probably going to move in the same type of a direction.
Yeah, thanks, Sheriff Hunter. I would, I guess, comment that it will be aligned. It won't be the same. But yeah, so I would say that, you know, in the future, right? Well, okay, let me rewind. Right now, we're kind of laying the path for how we get to the future. And like you mentioned earlier, Sheriff Hunter, the GPOP scores, what a great way to operationalize something. And also, you know, can we really stick to these 100% right now? I'm not sure. You know, were they adequately shared with the applicants and what they might mean and how they might be ranked? No. So maybe that's more in like the development of standards, as kind of as Judge Shanti was mentioning with the treatment court program. Maybe this is kind of our baseline, and then we hold these folks accountable to what they planned, and then that true GPOP score assessment and evaluation comes the next funding round, which would be very similar to the deflection program in terms of, you know, adherence to a program plan and being graded on such. Of course, what's different from impacts and deflection is deflection had that statutory mandate to provide projections, and impacts did not. So that was something that was not taken into consideration for impacts at all. Would that have been helpful? Who's to say? It was quite a can of worms. But you know, I think folks are making some great points here. That there is value in evaluating program operation. That's what this GRC has been attempting to accomplish and, you know, work towards. Is this the best way to do it? that remains to be seen. And I know staff have worked hard on presenting the, two feasible options. And they were mindful to think about too, that these returning applicants, they ran out of funding December 31st of 2025. They're currently flying impacts programs without funding right now. And we're officially in March. With contracting and disbursements, if we were to make a decision today, it's likely they would, be getting a disbursement towards the end of this month or the beginning of March, or excuse me, beginning of April. So I know that was on at least the CJC staff mind in terms of feasibility of some methodologies over others. But yeah, in terms of what Judge Shanti brought up about the GRC preserving particular categories, that was in consideration for this GPOP tier, right? To preserve personnel, to preserve direct services, to preserve housing, and some of those like really key components of an impacts operational program. But maybe we need to look more at the reduction for the equipment and supplies. How critical are those things? Do we want to move more weight, I guess, to the personnel and housing over the equipment and supplies? Could we perhaps get Douglas County and Union County, at least on this table, a little bit more funding? I'm not sure what Douglas County could do with 8% of their award. So, and I mean, I agree with Paul too, like the haircut method, the reduction overall, 70% of an award isn't fantastic. And I do appreciate the autonomy that at least grantees would have to choose where they get their budgets reduced. Maybe that extra case manager wasn't critical to their operation, but the full funding of their housing assistance was. That would be left up to them. And I guess in my experience as staff and now as co-chair, I would try to steer folks away from arbitrarily cutting line items without knowing the importance of why that line item was included in a budget. So giving folks the autonomy to choose on their own may be good, but yeah, I'll pass back to you all.
RJ, it looks like you've been very patient with your hand up for a while, so feel free to unmute.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate the discussion. I just wanted to express my reservations for this GPOP tier model, just because I don't feel like the GPOP score adequately captures the great work that these applicants are doing, partnering with community-based treatments and services, and really, the work that they're doing at the very beginning of that intercept model, as opposed to, the more expensive end of the spectrum. And then I just wanted to echo Janie's, concerns about something that I thought that we talked about at the very beginning of this, which was, figuring out how we could potentially, I believe the conversation was around potentially providing that admin support to applicants to figure out how can we capture any data around participants and how they're enrolled in OHP or some other form of healthcare, to switch the burden of the cost for those healthcare services from this program over to another a route to fund those healthcare services. And so it doesn't sound like that happened at all. Was that any discussion? Was there any movement around working with the applicants to say, hey, if you're providing peer delivered services, maybe you could utilize a community health worker to enroll patients into OHP so that you could provide peer support services through that billable model?
During this application process, no, that was not a part of any TA that we offered. It's definitely something for us to keep in mind as we make changes and reroute our program with 3069, but that was not something that was included with this application process.
I'll piggyback though, Amani. In Senate Bill 973, the establishing legislation for impacts, all applicants, all grantees are required to screen every eligible participant for medical assistance and OHP and Medicaid. So I think that there at least is an understanding that programs should be billing Medicaid first. And there are things that maybe will not be covered by Medicaid, and who knows the future of Medicaid. But they should be billing that first, and then any extra, I guess, expenses would then go toward these impacts funds. That's something that maybe the CJC could look into, like, with a lot more attention, adherence to that. Not only are you screening, but are you actually getting those folks signed up for Medicaid?
Perfect. Yeah, if there's an opportunity, moving forward to be able to connect with those groups and see about providing that little bit of technical assistance to do that and make sure that they're doing that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Really quickly, before we go on to the next speaker, I just wanted to check in and see if maybe there is a option from the menu of options that you all are interested in having staff do the math on, or you have some other option that you would like to see worked. That way, while you're having this discussion, they can be running the numbers in the background without us needing to take a break.
Yeah, and I think my comment will hopefully provide at least a suggestion. So, Amani, I'm struggling with both options for reasons that everybody stated, so I'm not going to go over them. But what I do think might make sense is if we were to take the haircut approach and blend the two. And so if we're taking a 70% cut or 70% allocation for all of the programs, let's potentially cut that in half and say all of the applicants are guaranteed 35% of their ask, and then use the GPOP approach to apply a methodology for the remainder of the funding so that we're at least using some type of criteria that isn't just everybody, regardless of the quality of their program, is going to get funded at a straight 70%. I struggle with that approach. So that's a suggestion. And also to follow up on the sheriff's comment about deflection, I feel like that was an imperfect process. Haven't been a part of it, and we were required statutorily to take into consideration future projections, but we did kind of change the ultimate allocation to put more weight on the past performance rather than just what people were going to project into the future. And so in that same vein, I really would like us to figure out a way that we are rewarding the programs that are doing this well and that have submitted really quality applications, and that they're able to be funded maybe a little more appropriately.
Thank you, Paul. It sounds like staff is going to begin working on that option that you offered. Stacy, I see your hand raised next. Stacy Brubaker.
I think it was Janie, actually.
It says, oh, I apologize. Yes, Janie.
Thank you. I do wonder if it's possible to go back to the two largest requests that have many clinical providers to find out, would it be possible not only for sustainability, but also potentially shaving off even $1 million from each of their asks if 50% of their clinical staff, or all of the clinical staff, 50% of the time could bill for their services rather than impacts funding 100% of all of their FTE. I'm very confused as to why and if there's a barrier, want to hear it. But I feel like we'd be remiss to make some global decisions, whether GPOP or a haircut, when we haven't asked that question to the two largest multi-million-dollar asks.
Thank you, Janie.
I hear you, Janie. I would just comment too that in order to be equitable, we would probably want to pose that question to all applicants. Any applicant that has a clinical provider funded at 100%, that question would need to go to all of those individuals to reply, and with some sort of explanation. My 2 cents too would just be mindful of timing. It took a long time to get this GRC together and get quorum. Programs are going without funding right now. I don't know when this GRC could meet again to make a decision. So maybe that's something that if we do go that route, maybe there's some sort of conditional approval, or that's something that we need to consider. Stacy, I think you were next.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of things to the Medicaid billing kind of question. I think that any county already is scrambling to make sure that they get all the Medicaid billing that they possibly can. I think that might be worth looking into, but I can't imagine there's a lot of gain there. And just to remind the people, all the CCOs are different, OARs are different regarding who can deliver what services and who gets paid. So it's really kind of a pretty complex kind of question around what Medicaid billing could help offset, but I suspect most people are already trying to do what they can. I don't support us making the decision about what categories people cut, because I don't even know how to know what would sink or sustain a program by us deciding what we cut or what we don't cut, like equipment, for example. I don't know what that would do to other proposals. And then I also it feels weird to me that we're adding some additional things that we want to look at that we didn't let the applicants even know would be necessarily scored in that way. And so I am more inclined to say the haircut way or a hybrid with the haircut way, because it feels weird to start adding all these other things. And I agreed with your comment, Casey, around equitable. If we're going to ask it of one, we need to ask those questions of all.
Thank you. Judge Shanti?
Yeah, so going to what Paul said, in my mind, the quality of the application, which results in a GPOP score, doesn't necessarily correlate with the quality of the program. And so I was wondering if staff could explain, is there a clear correlation between programs like, we know that, what is it, Jackson and Hood River, they're new programs, so we can't look at what kind of the quality of what they have done in the past, but is there, using the data that we have about what's successful, are the GPOPs, are those categories, the information in there, does that actually correlate with the quality of the delivery of services, etc.?
Will, are you available to speak to that question?
Of course, Amani. Judge Shanti, thank you for the question and the opportunity to respond. I think fundamentally the data looked at the previous performance of the program, while the GPOP is forward-looking. So it's about the proposed program for this biennium. So while there are sort of programmatic features and potentially some inherent structure to programs that we can define from the GPOP, these may be different programs, as we've encountered with Hood River County's application. And so while we certainly see shared features of the two, one is past looking, the other is forward looking, but that GPOP is informed by the sort of scholarly literature. It's also informed by what we've learned from qualitative interviews with existing impacts grantees over time. So we did draw on the available knowledge to generate those sort of more programmatic and parameter items. Just wanted to offer that as well.
All right, well, for me then, Paul, I'm willing to go along with your proposal, but not 30, cut it in half. More like give the reduction and then add maybe 10% or 15%, more like 10% for the GPOP. Because I don't think GPOP should have as much weight, because they didn't know they're going to be granted scored on that. And some of the programs are new, and for the other reasons I said, which is that the quality of the application, I think, also depends on the quality or the availability of people that know how to do it. So I think some kind of hybrid is better than just 70% across, but I'm not willing to do it that big of a cut.
Thank you. I do just want to note that without the GPOP scores, correct me if I'm wrong, Casey or Will or Jamie, but there would be no way to rank the applicants. So without using the GPOP, there wouldn't be any type of like tiered funding.
Right, it's just a matter of how much are we going to use the GPOP is what I'm saying. I'm not willing to do it. I'm not willing to say 50-50 because I think that's too much GPOP. That's all. That was my point. And I'm also willing to consider some other kind of hybrid, like whack out vehicles. But I understand why. Well, we're going to whack out a vehicle and maybe we don't know if that, I mean, I'm always in favor of direct services, like, like housing and peer support, that kind of thing. But I understand what has been said, that programs should maybe have the right, and they know better how they want to spend their money. So if there's another way other than the GPOP hybrid, that's fine by me. I think it depends on what it is, but I'm not willing to do 50-50, 50 GPOP, 50 haircut, because I don't trust the GPOP as much as that.
Thanks, Judge Shanti. I hear your comments, and I think that, at least hearing from you and Paul, and it makes sense. Our staff in the background are working on figuring out if these can be weighted, like smushed together in a hybrid way and weighted, and then maybe we can play with the percentages of that weight, and land on something once we get to see it. I, would be curious, without having the numbers.
Really quickly, Casey, I
yeah.
apologize. I don't mean to interrupt. I want to do a quick time check. We are at 12:46. So just letting you all know.
Thanks, Imani.
Going back to what Casey said, I think that she does make a very good point as we start looking at, just look at this GPOP right here. And I'm not trying to make decisions for anyone, but there's a significant difference if you look at those numbers and then you look at Clackamas, Douglas, and Union. And clearly Douglas and Union, that money could probably go back, and I would almost advocate, if they're going to go this direction, that we just drop them off based on the GPOP score and create the GPOP score in a way to drop them off, because I'm not sure what anyone's going to do with 8 and 11%. And it's probably funds being dispersed somewhere that there really can't be used. But the question still could be asked for Clackamas County and 67%. How much did Clackamas County weight their application, and does 67% get them there, or does that create a significant barrier for them that they need to reconfigure that whole program, and we're potentially throwing them $1.1 million that they're not sure how they can actually use that successfully to meet what they put in the application. So that kind of gets interesting, but there's $1.2 million on the table right there.
Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can upload the calculation with Paul's recommendation.
While she does that, DA Gunnels, do you have anything you wanted to add?
I think it's, maybe this is kind of the standard practice, but I think it's very dangerous to be this ad hoc in deciding counties, counties, deflection budgets. And I don't feel comfortable when you look at that chart. I really don't feel like we're implementing the legislature's intent by zeroing out Multnomah County, the largest county in the state, which was kind of the poster child for the legislation that went through in the first place that created deflection. And so that's just my concern. I feel like we probably need to be more across the board and even keeled than deciding which counties don't get deflection and which counties do.
Diagonals, just to clarify, when you say deflection, are you meaning the impacts program specifically?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay, understood. Yeah. As
Funded deflection.
I would say, just to just clarify for the record, that the impacts dollars are not the same as deflection dollars. The CJC does have the Oregon Behavioral Health Deflection Grant, but over $40 million that are going specifically for deflection funds. I would agree that impacts can be a kind of deflection, but also when thrown against that SIM map, circling back to a point that RJ made earlier, impacts has an intervention at almost every single point on that map, and it's specifically for the highest of high utilizers of both those emergency medical resources, the Oregon State Hospital, and criminal justice system. So I think that just to clarify for the record, impacts dollars are inherently very different than deflection dollars, although there is a good deal of overlap in maybe the populations served.
Okay, you all should be able to see the slide with the combination of the two. Judge Shanti, feel free to unmute and speak.
Yeah, Sheriff Hunter made a really good point that is just sticking with me, and that is some of these cuts might just destroy the program. And in this GPOP thing. And I mean, I understand that if we cut everyone, we only give them 70% of what they want, maybe the programs will be destroyed anyway. But at least it's just across the board and everyone has to deal with it. Whereas like Jackson County, that's a 59% they'll get. Well, they built a program. They're just starting. I don't know how much money they'd get, what percentage of they'd get if it was 70% instead of the 59%. But I guess I'm going back on my idea of doing a hybrid and back to favoring just the haircut, as horrible as it is, because I just don't see how it's going to be fair without the counties have known that they were going to be judged on this GPOP thing. And I'm assuming that they all know they're going to get cut because everyone's getting cut everywhere. But I think what Sheriff Hunter had to say really has stuck with me. So I guess I'm more in favor of a haircut now.
I do want to just quickly note that the GPOP questions were the bulk of the application outside of eligibility questions. So they ended up being scored, but the application was made out of those questions. So they did know they were getting graded on those questions.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So Money, just quick comment. It sounds like people are probably leaning more towards just the haircut. I guess what I would say is the CJC is going to have to deal with this issue, provided the legislature funds impacts 2 years from now. And I think we need to at least begin to signal a process that isn't just giving straight haircuts moving forward. I don't think that's the most equitable way to fund programs that may be very different qualitatively and in the numbers that they're serving. So, to the extent that this body is able to signal kind of what are the things that we feel are the most important factors so that grantees know moving forward, this is how you will be evaluated and funded, I think might be a good direction. Otherwise, we're going to be right back in the same spot because we're never going to have enough money for this program. It's always going to be oversubscribed.
Thank you, Paul. Nicholas?
So I think I kind of share everyone's frustration of looking at every single potential model for how we fix this problem. The only other answer would be, and I know, Casey, this goes against what you're saying, that nobody has any money right now, and so they need money. But somehow there almost has to be a projected percentage cut because of how much we're over. And that percentage goes back to each one of these applicants. And where can you now make cuts in your own program? I think that's the only way that you potentially sustain these programs. The same thing we recently saw in the deflection programs. And yes, Casey, 2 separate things. I get it. But in those pieces that we recently saw, this is what happened, is essentially just people chose, they made cuts, it came back, things weren't sustainable. And in Marion County, for example, I lost an entire building that was very much a face forward, going something different that nobody else was doing, because I wasn't able to say that this exactly is going to happen in this building. And I was actually 100% honest on my application that I couldn't give you that answer, where others just simply projected something and said, in a miracle world, this is what's going to happen. Sorry, that got subjective. Anyway, I think the only way to do this without destroying these programs, to Judge Shanti's point, is to ask these folks, where can they cut? And if they have built something that the program has to have this, then they also have the ability to say, well, then we can't move forward with this program at this time. So we're actually going to just remove our application or pull back entirely. And I would rather see that and see programs remain successful that need this fund than us funding something that doesn't produce the services that we want it to produce in the end, at the cost of another program that was fully functioning, working, and producing results, but we delivered them a significant blow that breaks their program. So I'm not sure exactly what I'm saying, other than maybe this needs to get recommended back to the CJC, and this needs to go back out to all of the applicants to, this is the cut percentage we'd like to have you make. And we want to know what essentially the sustainability of your program would be with these cuts, but we've gone over the allotted amount. And so that seems to be fair and equitable to me, to go back and ask each one of those programs, where can they make cuts?
Thanks, Sheriff Hunter. Jeannie, I see your hand, but in the time, we only have 2 minutes left of quorum. I just wanted to see if, as co-chair, if I could capture where we're at. What Sheriff Hunter is proposing is was the orange delay award decisions for applicant input option that was shared with you all. We have made the tribal award decision today, and I think this GRC is comfortable with tribal governments moving forward with their contracting processes and getting that funding going. What remains to be decided upon is what to do with the county applications. We could take a moment now and Janie, make sure we get your comment in, but if we want to delay the award decisions today, we could vote on that, hand it back to all county applications and ask them, hey, here's what we're working with. We ask that you give us your budget back, maybe at a 70% reduction, a 65% reduction, give us a couple options. And then CJC staff can crunch the numbers and see where we actually can land with the new budgets. Maybe some people shot for the moon and can reel it back a bit. And maybe other folks, really gave their current service level budget and need to be fully funded. Remains to be seen. Janie, did not mean to cut, so apologize.
I get it. In the interest of time, I just want to agree with Sheriff Hunter, and that essentially is close to what I would have shared. But the weight of these decisions is heavy, and I committed on this by being on this committee that I would make the time, and I think it's important that maybe we need to. When we are able to come back together, prioritize finding a time quickly so that we can follow up and make those award decisions once the ask has been made of the applicant.
Thank you. So just looking at time, we're at 1 p.m. So are we wanting to vote on delaying the decision and allowing the applicants to propose what they would be able to reduce? Or I know there were a couple of people who thought maybe they potentially would go with the uniform reduction. Which one would you guys like to vote on?
Bonnie, do you need a motion? Or is it just a vote?
It'll just be a voice vote. We just need to know which one we're going to vote on. And if we
So
can't get
I
that,
just
the
want
motion
to
works.
say that I worry a little bit about sending it back to folks. I think we might wind up in kind of the same position we're in now. And I know how hard it was to get this meeting scheduled. And I guess I want to understand what the implications are of delaying is for counties that no longer have funding. Would there be a gap in if this winds up being another month or two down the road before we make a decision? So I guess I appreciate Sheriff Hunter's proposal. Maybe we could vote on doing 70% haircut and just being done with it today, or going with his suggestion.
Okay, why don't we start with voting on the hybrid uniform reduction? And if we get enough no's, then we can move forward with voting on the other one. Does that sound like a good plan?
It sounds to me like there's consensus not to do the hybrid uniform reduction, but feel free to put it up for a vote.
Okay, so do we want to vote on delaying it?
Yeah, I think I agree with Paul. I think I heard consensus that maybe the uniform reduction wasn't the way that folks wanted to go. Paul, to answer your question, the implications, counties currently have no funding for their impacts programs that are still operating. They're still reporting data to REDCap, still seeing clients, and they received, their project period ended December 31st of 2025. So we're about 2 months into that no funding gap. It seems inevitable. We're not going to be able to make a decision today that everyone agrees upon. So we may have to move forward with finding more time to get together. I appreciate Janie's sentiment of, I know that many of these GRC members are committed to making a decision and getting folks together. I hope that if that is the case, let's try to be flexible with schedules to get this group back. But to me, it sounds like we may be more towards a consensus of delaying and asking folks what reductions they would make to their own budgets if possible to give them some autonomy and coming back. I saw a couple head nods, but are there any, questions or concerns, more discussion from the GRC.
I will add that we would just need in the GRC directive of what to do if we don't get a response from a applicant.
That's a good point, Amani. So I think what she's getting at is if we were to go back, staff complete outreach, you know, a week or two pass, nothing has been heard from that grantee, and they give no response, no reductions. Maybe there becomes that standard reduction, perhaps.
I would say at this point, this is a little bit like the legislature right now and the state budgets. And so everybody had to submit 2 to 5% cuts. And so if you're asking for that, I think just in the wording that CJC uses, that we are asking everyone to look at their own budgets and tell us where they can make, and you all come up with what the percentage cut that you want to see. And they need to propose that. If they don't, then they are essentially asking this committee to make the cuts for them. So if we don't receive anything back, then you're asking this committee to apply those cuts. But I do want to be respectful of Paul. And so I think there's two questions on the table. One, the first question is whether everyone just wants to go with the 70% haircut. And if everyone doesn't want to go with the 70% haircut, then the second question comes up. Do we want this to go back to the CJC to reach out to all the applicants, have them propose where they are willing to cut out of their budget to get us to a number that we can work with?
Thanks, Sheriff Hunter. I think that sums it up well. I'm curious, you know, if we did move forward with the 70% haircut method, you know, folks would have that autonomy to choose where that comes out of their budget. So I guess a clarifying question for this GRC would be, by asking folks to come back and make their own cuts, you know, the legislature method, for instance, would we entertain an 85% funding of a program? You know, like, are we, I guess, allowing the ability to have smaller reductions brought back to us, and then the CJC staff do the math as to, okay, maybe Deschutes asked for, you know, 90% of their budget, but Clackamas County asked for 85% of their budget, and meeting a happy middle. Is that what we're getting at?
I would say yes, just because of the difference in the numbers that are in the budget. I mean, if somebody, to Janie's point, says that they can work without this clinical supervisor or whatever it might be, that might be a much more significant cut to their budget than someone else that's building the program that says, I need this, but I'm willing to cut this. And I think that's where ultimately do we get to the number that we get to without just stipulating you have to do. I'm not sure, Casey. I think we're just making the life more difficult for all of you all, and I fully understand that. And I apologize. I'm just trying to put it back onto those counties right now to say, look, this won't work. And you've got to tell us where you can do something different. And if, to sort of the whole group's point, if we get back into this room, because we're all committed to doing so, to getting this money out, if we get back into